Good day to everyone out there in the tabletop RPG community. This is GM Eric here with Forward RPG, coming at you with another installment of Forward Academy, our longer form videos where we talk about a topic related to our hobby. Today I'm coming at you with the art of the pitch, where we talk about how to get players interested in the RPGs that you want to run. So without further ado, let's get started. As an organization, Forward RPG is defined by three tenets. First off, if you're not familiar with us, we are a group of game masters that gather together because we love to run games besides Dungeons & Dragons. We think there's a lot of value out there in non-D&D RPGs, and the hobby's really starting to get keen on those, and we love to see it. As an organization, we make it a point to follow our three tenets, which are: we run games besides Dungeons & Dragons. We're willing to run for anybody, regardless of experience level or who they are. And our third one is we use a yes and style rather than a gotcha GMing style. But I'll get into that in the next video. Right now we're focusing on that we'll run games for anyone. A big part of that is we need to appeal to anyone. Tabletop RPGs, especially in public context, which is where Forward RPG really cuts our teeth, we mainly run public games. Have had a problem historically of catering to a very specific demographic. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's generally white, generally more upper class, although that's not as set in stone. Generally cisgender men is traditionally who has been associated with our hobby. And if the hobby really wants to grow, it has to reach out to people besides that. There's a huge market out there of people who want to play these games and would enjoy these games, I believe, that just haven't vibed with the marketing and the products that have been produced, especially in previous decades. I think the hobby's getting a lot better at that recently. And so a big part of marketing these games to these people is you got to connect with them where they're at. So that's why our second tenet is we're always willing to teach the game to anyone. We want to appeal to newcomers, and we also want to interest tabletop RPG veterans, people who maybe haven't been able to play for a while, or people who game actively, right? People who play a lot. They're absolutely welcome at our games as well. Why do you need a pitch? Well, it's the cornerstone of how you appeal to new folks. Your opportunity to sell yourself to them and sell your game to them. The people just generally don't have time to look into everything, everybody that's posting games, especially when it comes to a con. You're one game of many. You're often on an events list that's pages and pages and pages long, and people will generally only give an event a minute or two of their time. And if you can catch them with the pitch, then they're willing to spend more time and look more into what you're about and what your deal is. And if you're not the one to sell your games, who is? At the end of the day, you're the final product. You're the reason. You're the one that the most genuine sales pitch would come from. And we don't sell anything as Forward RPG, but when we're listing events at conventions or game stores or things like that, we are essentially marketing a product, right? We're running this game, and we're not taking any kind of cut money-wise, but we do still have to sell it. Pitching is vital in public games. It's the player or the attendee's only window into you and your game at first, but they're not going to do that out of the blue most of the time. There are, I would say, three classes of pitch that we do as Forward RPG usually. We've got our less than a minute pitch. That's what I call your elevator pitch. That's what you're going to list as your event description when it comes to convention games and game store games, things like that, where you really want to condense it, make it as punchy as possible. Sometimes we have pitches that can be up to about a paragraph long, 3 to 5 sentences or so. That's if people are really starting to show a little bit of interest, then you can expound upon what you're talking about a little bit. And then the third class is like once you've got them, right? Or if they're an expert and they're interested, they're a veteran of the hobby, they've played a lot of tabletop RPGs, and they're interested in hearing more about the game you're running. Maybe you talk about core mechanics, maybe you talk touchstones. There's several other topics you can bring up at that point. So let's talk elevator pitches. Elevator pitches have to be short, ideally fewer than 2 sentences. They have to be punchy. You've really got to hammer the point immediately because you don't have a lot of time to do it. You cannot use passive voice with an elevator pitch. You cannot use, the forms of be, right? I, was, she, is, all those. There's no room for that for an elevator pitch. And then the last thing is you've really got to hook them with what limited time you've got. Bring up what you think is the best part of the game you're trying to sell, the session you're trying to advertise. Don't reveal everything, right? If there's a big reveal at the end of your session or your planned adventure, allude to it, right? Tease it, but don't reveal it in the description. Let's talk pitch fundamentals. The big 3. Who are the player characters? How are they tied into the game? What is a player character's place in the game world, right? Like, who am I as I have this character sheet in front of me? What is my initial situation? What are some things I know about myself and about the world around me? Second thing, what do the player characters do? What is the action of the game? This has both kind of a narrative and a mechanical element. Mechanically, if I want to do a thing, is that handled? What am I looking for on my character sheet? What kind of dice am I reaching for? What is kind of my limits? What's my power level as a person? Could I fly? Do I need to walk everywhere? Do I have a horse? There's all different kinds of things you can bring up there. And narratively, what's my status in the world? Who are the big players that are around me that I know of? Are there dragons? Are there corporations? What kind of game are we playing? And then the third thing is, what kind of stuff will the characters encounter? These are all things you can bring up in your pitch as far as what the player characters could encounter. What's the arc of the game? Or what's the initial quest, right? Like, are they sent to rescue someone who's been captured? Are they trying to just take as much money and run as they can? And what's the scope of play, right? Is this a street level kind of adventure where we're defending our block? Or is this, in these 4 hours or however long your session is, we're going to save the world, right? There's such a huge variation there. And I feel that's a great thing to play with as you're coming up with your pitch. Definitely take what I've said. These are not absolute rules. So feel free to play with it. Make it right for your table and your vibe. Really, another great thing about pitches, it's a good opportunity for a GM's self to come through, a GM's voice. And that's so crucial because another part of the session that you're advertising is that you're going to be the one running it. And so the strengths and the things that you can bring to the table, if you can feature those within the description, it really helps bring people to the table and make sure people have an experience lined up with what their expectations are. It's not foolproof. None of these are. I'm not a snake oil salesman. I'm not going to tell you it works every time because it doesn't. Some things you can also do to modify your pitch is you could mention some touchstones. So things that your adventure relates to that are in popular media, A lot of times these are used for systems. For instance, Blades in the Dark, the RPG, mentions Dishonored as a touchstone. And it mentions Lies of Locke Lamora, which is a novel series, as a touchstone, because those are things that have kind of inspired the vibes of the game. But with an adventure, you can get a lot more specific, right? You can mention a specific TV show season or maybe episode or even a character, right? Like maybe the touchstone is as specific as that. It's not great if the audience that you're trying to advertise to doesn't understand or doesn't know the touchstone. If they don't connect with it, then it's just wasted characters. Of course, there's no way of knowing, but there are ways of guessing. Your pitch could address some mechanics. You could mention luck rolls. You could mention things about death being a common thing or how death will be handled. You can mention mechanical details within a pitch. And that can add a bit of flair there because you just don't see that a lot in most event pitches I've seen. But that being said, the first pitch is usually not the time to talk about how the core mechanic works or how, relationship mechanics or any of the other stuff in the system works. And people at events or people looking to get a game in my experience, prioritize the rest of the adventure over what the mechanics are. I know when I go to cons, I try to play games I haven't played yet, but if the adventure just doesn't sound interesting to me, I'm probably not going to try it, even if it's a system I'm interested in playing. Everything I said could be not fitting to your case. I hope you come away from this with some kind of realization of whether, hey, Jim Eric's got great advice, or no, he said I absolutely don't agree with, and maybe I go this way instead. That's absolutely valid. What I really hope is that it spurs you into thinking about your pitches and how you market your games and market your campaign pitches. So take all this with a grain of salt. Try what you like, drop what you don't, keep what works. Some resources to point you to. As you're reading a system or thinking of an adventure, always keep in mind what part of the tabletop RPGs appeal to you. Because odds are, if you're trying to sell the game or sell the session you're running, that's what's going to bring other people in as well. Different people get into games for different reasons, but you're not alone in how you evaluate games, right? Everyone's unique, but there's a lot of crossover. Think about what your deal breakers are when it comes to an adventure or a system that you're thinking of running. If there's any lines that you're absolutely not okay with happening, right? Like if, as you're coming up with your pitch, think of if other people might have deal breakers about like proprietary dice or how many players can play there. Absolutely make sure that those things are conveyed in the pitch, because people don't like to be surprised like that in the middle of the session. Because then, once a player signs up for your game, they'll have some sort of expectation of how it's going to go. And if their expectations crushed or not met in an unsatisfying way, then they're way less likely to sign up with you for another session. But as long as you're upfront about what the game is, it's a lot better for them setting their expectations and you having an enjoyable experience with everyone at your table having a good time. And last but not least, how do you know what your answers are to the above two bullet points? How do you know what in a tabletop RPG appeals to you? And how do you know what your deal breaker is? For me, what I found that works is play more games. Not just the same game over and over again. Play new systems. Play systems that are different from what you're normally playing. If you're just going through the list of Powered by the Apocalypse games and you're trying to, check every one of them off the list, you're not going to learn as much as you would if you say go from Powered by the Apocalypse to an OSR game. Just to try it, you don't have to stick with it. Or from Powered by the Apocalypse to maybe one of the more neo-trad games like Vampire V5 or something like that. And in addition, you really could be consuming more RPG content, right? Actual plays are fine, but for the purpose of learning how to pitch, look at what Critical Role puts as their video descriptions, right? Their pre-game marketing, they're professionals, right? They're experts, so their pitches are great to bring people in. But that's it for this episode of Forward Academy. I want to thank you for making it this far, and I hope you have great gaming in your future. Have a good one.